In May 1941, the North Atlantic witnessed the emergence of the most powerful naval war machine ever built by Nazi Germany. The Bismarck, with its 250 meters in length and 45,000 tons, represented the pinnacle of German naval engineering. Armed with 8 380mm guns and protected by virtually impenetrable armor, the battleship was considered invincible even by the Germans themselves. Its objective was clear and devastating: to break the British blockade and destroy the supply convoys that kept England in the war. In the early hours of May 18th, the Bismarck left the port of Gotenhafen accompanied by the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen. Operation Rheinebung had begun. The command of the British Royal Navy received the news with alarm. If the Bismarck managed to reach the convoy routes in the Atlantic, the consequences would be catastrophic. Each sunken merchant ship meant food, weapons, and fuel that would not reach England. Winston Churchill personally gave the order: find the Bismarck and destroy it at all costs. The first interception took place in the Denmark Strait between Iceland and Greenland. The legendary battlecruiser Hood, pride of the Royal Navy, set sail to meet the German giant accompanied by the modern battleship Prince of Wales. On the morning of May 24th, the two groups sighted each other. What followed lasted only 8 minutes, but it would change the course of the battle. At 5:55 a.m., a salvo from the Bismarck hit the Hood. The explosion that followed was apocalyptic. The British ship broke in two and sank in less than 3 minutes, taking with it 1,415 men. Only 3 survived. News of the disaster shocked Great Britain and the world. The invincible Hood had been destroyed, but the Bismarck did not emerge unscathed. The Prince of Wales had managed to hit the German battleship with 2 projectiles before retreating. One of them punctured the fuel tanks, causing the ship to begin leaving a trail of oil in the ocean. Admiral Gunther Lütjens, commander of the operation, made the decision that would seal the Bismarck's fate: abandon the mission and seek refuge in occupied French ports for repairs. It was the beginning of the end. Churchill mobilized all available resources. More than 40 warships and 6 aircraft carriers were deployed to hunt the Bismarck. For 2 days, the German battleship managed to elude its pursuers, disappearing into the vastness of the Atlantic. But on the afternoon of May 26th, a Catalina reconnaissance plane finally located it just 700 kilometers off the French coast. Time was running out. If the Bismarck reached the protection of the German Air Force based in France, the hunt would end in failure. The Royal Navy had one last card to play. The aircraft carrier Ark Royal launched its antiquated Swordfish biplanes in a desperate attack. They were slow, fragile planes, made of canvas and wood, facing the most powerful warship in the world in rough seas and under intense anti-aircraft fire. But it was precisely their fragility that became their advantage. Flying low over the waves, the Swordfish launched their torpedoes. One of them hit the Bismarck's rudder, jamming it 15 degrees to port. Its fate was sealed. The German giant could now only sail in circles, unable to maneuver, waiting for dawn and the arrival of the British fleet. On the morning of May 27th, the battleships Rodney and King George V encountered the Bismarck. What followed was a methodical execution. For an hour and a half, the British ships poured tons of projectiles onto the German vessel. The Bismarck's guns responded bravely at first, but one by one they were silenced. The superstructure was reduced to twisted wreckage. Fires consumed the ship from bow to stern. But the armor held. The Bismarck's hull simply refused to sink. When it became clear that there was no hope left, the German crew initiated sabotage procedures. They opened the floodgates, preparing explosive charges, determined not to let their ship fall intact into enemy hands. At 10:40 in the morning, the Bismarck finally capsized and sank, taking with it more than 2,000 men. Only 115 survived. The Battle of the Bismarck represented a turning point in naval warfare. It demonstrated that even the most powerful surface ships were vulnerable to air power. Germany would never again risk its large ships in offensive operations in the Atlantic. The sacrifice of the Hood and the British determination to avenge its loss ensured that convoy routes remained open, allowing England to continue resisting. The pride of the Kriegsmarine now lay 4,800 meters deep, a steel tomb for thousands of German sailors. A symbol of the end of an era where battleships dominated the seas. Naval warfare would never be the same again. The news of the sinking of the Bismarck echoed through the high military commands of all the nations at war. For the British, it was a bittersweet victory. The Hood would never be forgotten, and the price paid to avenge its loss was calculated in immense resources, precious fuel, and the mobilization of an entire fleet during critical days. But Churchill knew that victory was essential not only militarily, but psychologically. Great Britain had proven that it could confront and defeat the best that Nazi Germany had to offer. For Adolf Hitler and the German High Command, the loss of the Bismarck was devastating. The Führer had never been enthusiastic about naval power, preferring to concentrate resources on the Army and Air Force. Now his distrust seemed justified. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, commander of the Kriegsmarine, saw his surface warfare plans crumble. Hitler strictly forbade Germany's few remaining large ships from being risked in offensive operations. The Tirpitz, Bismarck's sister ship, would spend most of the war hidden in the Norwegian fjords, a potential threat that tied up British resources but would never again engage in direct combat. German naval strategy changed radically. U-boats became the primary weapon in the Atlantic. Smaller, cheaper, and harder to detect, submarines could achieve what large battleships could not: silently attack convoys and disappear into the depths. The Battle of the Atlantic became a cat-and-mouse game between packs of submarines and destroyer escorts, a silent and deadly struggle that would last until the end of the war. The loss of the Bismarck also accelerated a revolution in naval warfare that was already underway. Air power had proven decisive. It was airplanes that found the Bismarck while it was hiding in the Atlantic. It was a torpedo launched from an airplane that sealed its fate by damaging its rudder. Aircraft carriers, not battleships, were clearly the future of naval combat. In the Pacific, the Japanese and Americans had already reached the same conclusion. Pearl Harbor, just 7 months later, would definitively confirm this new reality. For the German survivors, rescued by British ships and the German cruiser that arrived too late, a long journey as prisoners of war began. Many would forever carry the memories of those terrible final hours. The deafening roar of enemy cannons, the cries of the wounded, the twisted metal, and the fire consuming their ship. Some insisted they had sunk their own ship, refusing to accept that the British had defeated them. The truth probably lay somewhere in between. The Bismarck was doomed, and the sabotage charges only hastened the inevitable. In the years that followed, the Battle of the Bismarck became legend. Books were written, films produced, songs composed. The German ship achieved in death the immortality it sought in war. But for decades, its resting place remained unknown. The Atlantic Ocean guarded its secret in dark, deep waters, inaccessible to the technology of the time. It wasn't until June 1989 that an expedition led by explorer Robert Ballard, the same one who had found the Titanic, finally located the wreckage of the Bismarck. At almost 5,000 meters deep, the powerful battleship lay upright, surprisingly intact in many respects. The bow pointed towards the ocean floor, the stern slightly raised. The main gun turrets had detached from the hull as it sank, but remained nearby. The armor that had withstood so much punishment still covered the hull. The images captured by the submersibles revealed a ghost ship preserved in the icy depths, a monument to the thousands who died on it and because of it. The footage showed poignant details. Boots still on deck where sailors had left them before the end. The giant swastika painted on the deck for air identification, symbol of a regime that promised 1,000 years and lasted only 12. Impact marks from projectiles covering the entire superstructure, silent testimony to the fury of that final battle. Scientists who examined the wreckage confirmed that the German crew had indeed sabotaged the ship, but that it was already doomed by the British bombing. The discovery brought closure to many families who had lost loved ones that morning in May 1941. Memorials were held in both Germany and Great Britain, honoring all the sailors who died in those terrible days, regardless of which side they fought on. The Bismarck ceased to be merely a symbol of Nazi propaganda and became a monument to the horrors of war. A reminder that every great warship was also a home to thousands of young men, most simply following orders, many leaving behind families who would never see them again. The Battle of the Bismarck taught lessons that resonate in modern navies. No ship, however powerful, is invincible. Coordination between different branches of the armed forces is essential. Intelligence and reconnaissance can be as decisive as firepower. And perhaps the most important lesson: in war, bravery and technology are not enough if strategy and circumstances conspire against you. Today, the Bismarck remains in its underwater tomb, protected by international treaties that recognize it as a final resting place for the dead. No artifacts can be removed. It is both a war memorial and a testament to the futility of relying on Marvel weapons to decide conflicts. The war would be won not by superships or superweapons, but by industrial capacity, the determination of the people, and the courage of millions of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. The Bismarck was feared for days and remembered for decades, but its real impact was to show that the era of the dominance of large battleships had ended, and that the future belonged to more versatile technologies and more flexible tactics. The steel giant now sleeps eternally in the depths of the Atlantic, a submerged monument to an era it itself helped to end. In the cold, dark waters of the North Atlantic, where sunlight never reaches, the Bismarck rests surrounded by the absolute silence of the depths. Around it, marine life follows its course, indifferent to the history that steel hull carries. Tiny organisms colonize its surfaces, slowly transforming the instrument of war into part of the ocean ecosystem. Time, which transforms everything, does its silent work. The men who built it, who sailed it, who fought against it, are long gone. The nations that waged that battle no longer exist in the forms they had in 1941. The world has changed in ways that none of those sailors, German or British, could have imagined in those days of May when cannon fire echoed over the icy waves. But the Bismarck remains, no longer as a symbol of power or terror, but as a reminder. A reminder that history is written not only by nations and leaders, but by the thousands of ordinary people who live with its consequences. A reminder that every war machine, however impressive, carries within it human lives with their hopes and fears. And perhaps, most importantly, a reminder that even giants eventually fall, and that the ocean, patient and eternal, holds all the stories that men would prefer to forget.